Cybersecurity Show brought to you by the Prancer Intelligent Cloud Security Technologies. My name is Jeff King. I'm Chief Strategy Officer for Prancer and a 40-year veteran in the technology world. Our podcast is dedicated to discussing and discovering new strategies to dealing with the complexities of our corporate cybersecurity world. And complexity is the enemy of all of our securities, as it creates a significant amount of risk for our organizations. What our podcast is going to be focused on today is validating your zero trust security measures. In our podcast, we invite guests to go ahead and share the perspectives, one from the inside of the perimeter or the blue team, and one that is representing the red team, which is more on the attack side and perspective. We quickly provide unique perspectives about the topic and try to go from one area to another. Again, our topic is zero trust security measures and the advantages and vulnerabilities of those strategies. Our speakers today will be Kumar Chandramoli and Farsi Madhavipur. Farsi is the CEO of Prancer Cloud Security. Tell us a little bit about your background, Farsi.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm CEO at Prancer, and I have more than 10 years of experience in the cloud security and focus on different security aspects of the cloud when it goes from the app code to the infrastructure to the security posture and design security architecture based on different concepts during these years. Happy to be here in this show.
Great. Representing the blue side is Kumar. Kumar, you give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so my name is Kumar Chandramoli. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Prancer. And in the past, I have done cybersecurity extensively, ranging from identity and access management to building security operations centers and building threat intel hunting investigation programs, data and privacy security. So love and breathe cybersecurity, and I'm really excited to welcome you all for the next great edition and the hot topic of zero trust security. Back to you.
Well, Kumar, I'm going to stay with you because the zero trust security, from your viewpoint, you've been able to set up these things, the perimeters, and you understand the process from the inside point of view. Can you give us a little perspective of some of the things that you've done with zero trust?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something it's been brewing in the market, not just now, for some time, actually, if you think about it, in different forms and fashion. But one of the misconception people have, mainly people who are not really exposed to zero trust to the extent they should have, is they think it's just a one single solution. Can someone offer that? I think, right? But it's not. It's more of a conceptual ideology or an architecture that you build, which will help or any organization that you are helping to make sure they have the security controls properly intact in a very easy way, and also enable them to have an experience for the user wherever they are from. They can come from anywhere with any device or any time, but the user experience should be the same across the board, right? And in the background, as an IT professional or information security professional, they have to enable the supporting architectures and supporting controls to feed that, right? I think, in my opinion, um, a well implemented zero trust security would be something where the user doesn't see a difference in the way they're accessing systems, but in the background, the security operations center and the compliance and who are dealing with the risk should also be happy about having an effective security controls in play, right? I think,
Yeah.
in my opinion, that's where the zero trust will make a big play in helping the IT and also the users, and end of the day, providing a secure solution for a business operation. If you think about it, right? That's, in my opinion, as
Yeah.
zero trust should do.
So Farsi, from the red, I know you have a very interesting perspective from the red team side, especially from the attack side, because zero trust basically has come into our corporations because of the the abilities of it to protect the data better, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, from the red team perspective, basically, we have to always assume the breach and then prevent the spread of the breach in company network and assets. Basically, from the red team perspective, what I want to see when it comes to the zero trust is that every level that we are going to break something, to attack something, and then if we're successful of that, we should see again some problems, some blockers going to the next level. Because like in the traditional world, back in the time when everything was on-premise, usually uh, the way that they secure their network, their environment, their assets, they put like a firewall in place. And then, for example, every user, they wanted to connect to the on-prem network, they're using a VPN, and then going through the firewall, connecting to the VPN, and then access to all the company resources that's available there. But that model cannot be valid anymore because of like multiple reasons. In the recent year, like 2 3 years, because of COVID, we saw so many changes in company structure. Many companies going to the cloud at a rapid pace because of the COVID, because they wanted to empower the distant users to be able to use company assets and continue their business. So we saw an acceleration in the cloud adoption, and because of that, creating different resources in the cloud to be able to support those people working remotely. And also because of the cloud innovation, so many cloud native applications are coming up. But the problem is, if you want to apply the same mindset that we had back in the on-premise world to apply that to the cloud environment, that doesn't work. Because in the cloud environment, we need to have a continuous verification. There are paradigm shift. For example, we should have a micro segmentation instead of a macro segmentation. There are like software defined networking, continuous monitoring, the visibility to the cloud. All of those concepts needs to be redefined and needs to be applied to the cloud environment. And these are all the concepts that are supporting the zero trust, because the old model, the on-prem model, is no longer viable in the cloud. The model that support the on-premise perimeter network, always on VPNs, have an enterprise gateway. So those are not valid anymore. And also because in the recent years, we see so many new zero-day vulnerability coming out. And currently the industry, the firewalls are mostly based on the signature-based concept. For example, because an attack, they understand the attack, they understand the signature of the attack, so the firewalls are start blocking those kind of traffic going through that. But again, because of so many zero-day vulnerability coming out, and those zero-day vulnerabilities, basically there is no signature available to understand those attacks and prevent them. So because of that, we have to go to the zero trust mindset. It's a paradigm shift. It's a new architecture we have to apply. There are so many resources that involved that needs to be changed, and being able to support the zero trust architecture in the networking and other layers of assets that we have in the cloud.
So those are the complexities, certainly, of what we're facing with a zero trust. The topic today is about validation and, security validation. Just a quick little reminder, It's a technique that allows businesses to get an extensive report on what could happen if they suffer in a cyber attack. So, we talk about, validation seemed to be a pretty easy thing to do with the past on-prem type of situations. Kumar, when you are dealing now with getting a validation from the blue team perspective, what are some of the challenges that you had faced or are facing?
Yeah, and this is an area which is really interesting and also challenging at the same time, because the opportunity that we have to get into a better space from an organization perspective is huge. If the architects think right, and if the organization think right, and they make this happen, right, there should be a high level commitment. Now, when we think about some of the things Farshid pointed out, there is a rapid adoption in cloud, which is no new news. It's only happening in a more accelerated fashion. And the good thing is, even the security organizations are completely sold most of the time nowadays in the security products and the SaaS products, right? Which is a good thing. Now, from a validation perspective, you got to understand, while these things are happening, the firewall used to be like IP based firewalls. Now we are talking about identity driven firewalls. And then when we talk about authentication, used to be legacy authentication. Now we are transitioning towards a passwordless authentication using token system, which a lot of customers and user experience is fantastic. And also there is a high level of elevated security that comes with that. Now we are talking different terminologies. We don't talk IP based anymore. We're not talking about legacy. We're not trying to do overhauling, even though a lot of companies do that from a security perspective or for the purpose of security. They take the users routing from VPN, they go back to MPLS, they bring back them on, rather than they can use the internet. And now it is happening, right? So the new context is changing. It's more identity based and context based, right? So the organizations and the architects have to understand what's happening, what has changed. Once they understand that, the way to validate becomes easier, and they can be a mouthpiece for the IT organizations to tell them what needs to be validated and how to be on top of this game, right? So the manual pen testing, if you think about it, that is moving towards automated pen testing, right? So the terminologies are all changing. Now, how do you keep up a good eyesight in validating, right? First of all, I would say define your protect surface. If you do not know what you're protecting, you are not able to validate what controls that you need to validate, right? You cannot reduce your, I want to say, attack surface anymore. It's not viable. Attack surface is only going to grow. It is because of evolving threat landscape. So you have to better understand your protect surface, what you're protecting, in order to validate your security control. Right? Now, from a zero trust perspective, you also have to map the transaction flows, because you talked about context, very important. So once your systems are enabled, the solutions are deployed and designed and deployed, it should be ready to map the transaction flow. What do I mean by that, right? You are looking at authentication frame, right? There's constant authentication needs to happen for user identities, because they're coming from anywhere, using any device, using any time. So there is an authentication mechanism, which is the key for zero trust, right? It has to happen constantly, because it has to trust the trustworthiness, and it's much more critical for this piece of the puzzle. We have to incorporate, the organizations should be looking at incorporating identity and credential access management. People call it ICAM with another new terminology, but that gives you a multi-factor authentication and be able to access and govern the policies. So that's number two. You have to map the transaction flow with identity. Now, the third one I would say is your architects. They are the key to this puzzle. They have to help architect a zero trust network and validate them. And first, you touched upon micro segmentation. It's a key for zero trust. Just like how identity and context, the micro segmentation is the key. If you're able to make them into zones, and then it would block a lot of attackers coming in one zone, they'll be blocked to the next zone, because in zero trust we don't trust internal users and external users, right? We don't trust both of them. We only verify all the time. So micro segmentation architecture is important. Now the fourth one I would say is creating a policy so it can be enforced all the time. That's the key, number four. And the last one I would say, or I bucket all of it, right? And that can be segmented into multiple conversation, but overall I'll give you a picture, which is very important, is how do you monitor them? Yeah, you have the architecture, you have implemented the policy, and you have identity solution in place, and you may have a network which could be a SASE, which is another whole new concept, which I think the industry will move towards. Once you have all of that in place, but how do you monitor them? So your security operations center should know exactly what's happening at any given point in time, so they can react and remediate or identify an ongoing attack or an imminent attack that is there, it's brewing, and it's going to happen. So you got to make your SOC and intelligence work for you, for your intelligence team to look for key elements in the network outside and inside, to track all this policy and environment, which give you all pieces of puzzle to track any new type of attack coming in. And once you have that, then you can scale, but you also have to maintain constantly, constant validation. That's the number five. These are
Yeah.
the five things that I will do from a validation perspective. Every single area I talked about is by itself a separate topic that you can talk. Architecture is a separate area that we will do at some point in time,
Right.
which is the key for this. Like the architects play a big role in bringing all things together. So those are the things. If I am being a CISO or I'm a VP or a C-level suite or as someone responsible for information security and zero trust, these are the things that I will have in my mindset to have a solution in place, so our business can be secured more effectively as we adopt automation.
Okay. So far, so you're just heard all the precautions that the blue team is setting up against you, and what are the challenges he has to do from a red team. If you had to do a report for some of our clients, what are some of the challenges in the zero trust environments that you would be facing?
Yep. So for the challenges, I want to focus a little on the availability of the proper tools to be able to validate the zero trust security, because now there are many vendors available out there that they provide zero trust solution. It could be like a complete package or part of that. And there are like lots of them that you're getting confused which one you have to go for. But on the validation side, still, there are lots of room to work. And on the red team, what I'm looking for to be able to have an automated validation for the zero trust measures. Because now, if a red team, they want to validate the effectiveness of a zero trust implementation, they have to do most of the validation manually. And the reason is like the tools that are available nowadays, they're not supporting the zero trust features that needs to be validated. As an example, let's talk about like the authentication that Kumar mentioned. Usually, like in the on-prem environment or legacy applications, authentication is different. But when we are moving to a zero trust environment, usually each service and each device, they're relying on a certificate-based authentication. It could be like a client certificate or an MTLS space. And for the tools that are available for the red team, for the DAS tools, dynamic application security testing, like none of the tools available out there, they support these new authentication mechanisms to be able to help the red team to do the validation of the zero trust measures. And then on top of that, because the tool also, other than the authentication, supporting new methods like the OAuth or MTLS, also it should be possible that the tool as a user or as a device assume different roles in the network. For example, let's talk about the white boxing, black boxing, inside the network, outside of the network, and being able to use the cloud native roles to be able to access other resources. For example, let's talk about Microsoft Azure. They're providing service principal names, therefore providing managed identities to move from the traditional password-based authentication to the passwordless. But in order to pen test those applications, our pen testing engine, our validation tool should assume those roles to be able to access other services and make sure the authentication, the authorization happens again, because that's one of the main principles in the zero trust design, that each time an application wants to connect to another service, they have to be authenticated and authorized to do that. There is no pre-authorization available for any of those roles. And the main challenge that I see, the lack of tooling. Most of the validation should be done on a manual basis. And because of that, the problem is it's not scalable, it's not repeatable, and it cannot go at the scale of the cloud, basically. So we are lacking the validation side of that. And that's like the main challenge that I see on the zero trust validation.
So both of you talk about this is very, I mean, it's complex, and you wonder what happens if you don't validate the zero trust world. I mean, Kumar, there's a lot of exposure right here.
Yeah, no questions about that, right? It's true for anything. Like if you don't validate your controls, you really don't know what you are doing, right? Even nowadays, over the past few years, the security definitely has grown in the pipeline and getting good funding compared to like previous years, right? So people ended up in buying lot many tools, but how do they know if the tools are working in their favor, right? If you don't validate or push the buttons to test it? So from a challenge perspective, there is quite a bit of challenges. First of all, zero trust by itself is not an easy thing to implement, right? Because of the things that I spoke about. One, people have to understand first. That's a big problem. And the second, it has to be an organization-wide effort in order to do that. A lot more teams have to come together, like identity team, network team, risk team, cloud team. They all have to come together in building the solution for the organization. Otherwise, I'll tell you, this is not going to work. It's going to be difficult. It's a combined effort from all the teams, IT teams involved. And as Farshid mentioned, right, the tools definitely it's a problem. Meaning, the tools to validate the zero trust. That's what I meant by tools. There's not enough tools in the market space which can go out and check. There are 10 different areas that needs to be validated, and you have to have 10 different things to check. So at this point in time, if any tool can do even 50 to 60% of validation, then you have a winner, right? That's the way it is. The other challenges that I see, yeah, I mean, that's true. And then if you think about microsegmentation, we talk about it, it's as difficult. If you ask the data center guys, how do you migrate to a microsegmentation from a not microsegmented area? They would rather not touch it, right? For all the right reasons, but that's not the right way to do it. You have to enable yourself to go and do microsegmentation. Once you do it, it's much more easier. We talked about trust zones. I think that's a challenge. It's difficult to create one, but you have to create one. The next one is about user persona, I would say, right? The use cases. The teams within the organization have to understand who are we helping, how are we helping them. And at the end of the day, you cannot do everything at one shot. Start with two use cases. What if you have your consultants or working contractors? What if you don't want to give them full VPN access, but also have an ability to do their job on a daily basis? Can you do that? Yes, absolutely. If you design it properly, it can be implemented today, where they can be in any part of the world and they can just access only the required applications and not necessarily they need to go to everything within your VPN, right, within your network. It's possible. So you save your bandwidth, you increase your productivity, you increase your security, you are lowering your risk. It's possible, but they have to do it. The biggest other problem that I see is with the legacy applications, the HR and other applications, which is difficult to enable these zero trust models, but then the organization have to focus on moving the legacy apps into something more viable SaaS applications and something very tangible to be able to integrate with the new solutions, right? Now, other few challenges you want to think about is the auditing your default access controls. How are the teams are doing that? How are they doing that today? Are they validating that? I think that's a challenge I always see. Uh, how how much or do you know about your default access controls? It's always a problem. High level commitments are required, right? And if you don't have an high level commitment, I don't think organization will have a success in this area. Definitely, that's a must, and make it organizational. And you need to have your systems thoroughly assessed on a regular basis, which gives you more iterations when you go through and developing this. It's not a one single shot. It's not a one single tool. People have to understand that, right? It's a constant process, but the foundational should have a wider view, more strategic view, and every decisions that is made within applications to be bought out have to have a consultation with the zero trust team so that there is a constant movement without you know there are gaps where it can fall, right? um, you have to also manage the intelligent last mile management of network controls in place. So these are all, I think, as a challenge. There's a lot more challenge. uh, these are something people don't put a perspective. They have to bullet point it, they have to channelize this, and they have to have a clear mindset and operating as a team. I will highly highlight that last point. They have to work as a team to make a zero trust more successful for their organization and business, right? That's the challenge that I see.
Okay. So, red team, you're looking at the zero trust environments and the measures that are out there. What happens if validation is not as complete? Is that, from your perspective, is that something that's going to be a disaster, or what's happening with our corporations?
Uh, yeah, absolutely. There is like a well-known quote in security. They're saying if you are not validating your security, basically, buying all of those security tools doesn't help you. The one that Kumar mentioned. So validation is the key. Like after you think that you are secure, now you have to validate that. And on the zero trust architecture, because usually the devices, the servers, the applications, they're exposed to the public internet. The problem could be intensified if there is like a misconfiguration, if there is a breach, so they can like easily exfiltrate the data, and there are like lots of problems. So basically, even for zero trust, also the validation is the key. It's not like I want to say it's like 0 and 1, so you will not be protected at all if it's not 100%. Again, as Kumar mentioned, like 60-70% also could be a huge improvement over having nothing in place. and trying to replicate the on-premise mindset into the cloud environment. But also on top of that, I want to talk about the shift left mindset and because security industry is going through the shift left practice to make sure everything is secure just from the inception of the application when app developers or DevOps engineer working on the code, they can apply security concept on top of that. And that's another challenge that we see in the zero trust environment, because when you want to validate your zero trust, you have to put your application in a certain context to be able to validate that. So all the connections, all the identities should be available. And then at that time, it's possible for you to validate that if the application is secure. But on the other side, when we are talking about shift left and make sure we are empowering developers and we are putting enough tools for developers in place to be able to security check their own work, because that bigger context is not available at the developer's machine, then some of those shift left mindset also needs to be changed to be able to apply to a zero trust environment. So that's also another challenge, even from the development perspective, from the shift left. That's also very important that we are empowering those people also to be able to security test their own work, even in the zero trust environment, which the context is not available on a developer's machine.
Okay. So I'm hearing get it early, maybe something that is you new and unique to a developer group, especially since they got so much pressure to perform and be productive and get their products into the cloud. The cloud's complex and always changing, so we have to have some kind of automation to stay on top of it. And then you also have the cyber world is and security side. That's not stopping, and they're not stopping the probes into these cloud complexities that are out there. So that's why you have developed a lot of the Prancer type of software, is to go ahead and be able to be totally in the loop all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea is like you should be able to continuously validate the security posture of the application in the cloud and make sure everything we put up there is secure. If you are applying zero trust measures in place, that's also make things because it's a new it's not a new concept, but so many new products are coming out, companies are starting to move into the cloud, they're utilizing those software. It's a new world, so make sure we can validate those measures, and we make sure that we have an attacker in the cloud for our applications to be able to host our applications in the cloud. So that's the vision and that's the mindset we have behind our cloud security solution, for sure.
Yeah, and it's more like, if I may add, right? Once upon a time, cloud was new, but it's not new anymore. It's been old for a long time now. And zero trust seems like new. They've been talking about it, but there is a lot of things happening in the zero trust area. But the validation can be in the initial stages and how people are looking at or not even thinking about validating that. And that's one of the reasons, like, our use cases in the platform actually goes out and helps out in the CI/CD pipelines beginning, and even checking the networks, identities, and everything starting, and probably gives about 50% uptick on your security validation. So this will tie in directly to give a benefit of understanding your investment in dollars and what's the ROI for all your security investments. And this will also help the risk team and the compliance team to understand, okay, so these are in place and this is definitely working. So the risk levels can be lower than what it's projected earlier, and that will go into risk register or the reports that go out to the board. So there is a lot that needs to happen, which will bring in the form of implementing zero trust and validating them. Designing properly, validating, and monitoring is what I would say, right? The way to implement that.
Okay. And zero trust platform, having a security system that is actually can coexist with that is a critical element to what Prancer has done. So, was there any final words on the zero trust situation? The kind of things that we need to be doing. Any final words from how about the red team on what are some of the key things to make sure you're doing in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would say you have to validate your zero trust measures. If you're not validating that, you don't know even like those exist or those are effective for you. That's the most critical thing that companies should think about that. It could be in any form. If you have like enough people to do it manually, that's fine. But usually that's not scalable, that's not repeatable, and you cannot go at the speed of the cloud. So you need to start utilizing an automated tool to be able to validate the zero trust security for you. That's like the most important thing and takeaway from this webinar from my viewpoint.
Okay. And Kumar, from someone who's been inside evaluating tools, it sounds like visibility was really key for you. Being able to be easy to use, something that could be, and then it also is working versus a manual situation. Is that the kind of the things that you would be leaving everyone with?
All of the above. And then the last but not least, never trust, always verify. That's it.
Okay. Well, that's great. So I think we walked through basically the whole topic of zero trust. Although, as Kumar said, there was 5 or 6 other topics that came up during our discussion. So, in our subsequent podcast, we'll mark those down as ones to cover as well. We also are always looking for speakers and people representing the red as well as the blue, and we'd love to have you in our future podcast. Be able to discuss what is the key elements to the cybersecurity industry. With that, I will say, hey, we're all set to sign off. Is that right? Any final words?
Well, we're good. Never trust, always verify. See ya.
Okay. Thanks for your help. Appreciate the input.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Maybe that was good conversation. Thanks.